Hello everybody, welcome to this edition of Recipe Redemption. Today we're tackling the bean cheesecake. You heard that correctly. And this one does not come from mid-century or before. It comes from 1989 from the Heinz Baked Bean Recipe Book. It's one of those manufacturer-provided cookbooks to give you more ideas for how to use their product. So this is proof that culinary horrors that you may find on the interwebs are not restricted to 1965 and before, but they continue onwards even up to this day. I typically focus on vintage recipes, but every now and then one comes along from the modern area, or at least, from my lifetime, that bear mentioning. And this is one of them. So here's the bean cheesecake. Here's how it's made. I'm frightened. We start the crust with some water crackers, the tastiest of the crackers, along with some poppy seeds, and just blend it up until a fairly even grind. Transfer to a bowl and add some melted butter to them. I'm sure if you've ever made a graham cracker or Oreo crust, this is familiar to you. Add this to my springform pan. I just ordered these small ones so I could do these recipes. And set that in the refrigerator. In the meantime, I'm going to make a filling with some softened cream cheese, which now that it is softened, I didn't think to actually get a silicone spatula out to actually scrape this out efficiently, but that's good enough. To which I'm adding a bit of sour cream. According to the recipe, I need this, as well as 1 whole egg. And it wouldn't be a bean cheesecake without the beans, so I have a can of baked beans here, and because this is a smaller version of the recipe, I'm only using a half a can. Don't worry, I'll eat the rest later. But lid goes on this, and we blend until smooth. I do note that the recipe actually says to throw this into a liquidizer, which I sort of assume actually means a blender, but because this is such a small volume, I'm using my food processor and it's working fine. And I'm adding some bloomed gelatin. I should have heated this a little bit more. It's not entirely dissolved, so this did not set up quite as well as it should have, but it'll be fine. Once the crust has had a chance to refrigerate for a couple hours, I pour my bean cheesecake mixture into this, and it can go right almost up to the top. It's not going to expand or anything, and refrigerate for 2 hours. And there you have it, a bean cheesecake. And lo, 'twas written, inscribed in fact, upon the recipe book, that tome of culinary knowledge of yore, and upon it was written the words, "Here lies Heinz, king of beans. Look upon my works, ye mighty, and despair." Too much? Okay. It's really plain. I'm not going to bother to garnish this. You're supposed to put whole black olives and or cucumber slices on this. That seems like a waste, so I'm not bothering. So let's just take a little bit of this. Set up pretty firm. Why can't I pick this up? Wow. Okay, what do you want? Problem with Dobby is he doesn't know what he wants. He just comes up to you and says, "I need!" All day, every day, throughout the day and night. It's great. So, pretty monochromatic, this bean cheesecake. I'm working up the nerve to eat this. Honestly, I like all the constituent ingredients well enough. I mean, the water crackers I'm not all that excited about, but that's the point. They're not exciting. So together in one dish, they should be okay, right? Delightfully bland. The water crackers really pull what is already a dish that is not really soaring high, and really pulls it down to the ground. It makes it that much more plain. The sweetness of the Boston baked beans is really muted because of all the cream cheese and the sour cream that you've added. The sweetness isn't there. The earthiness of the beans is still there, but yeah. I take it back. This honestly does need garnish, because it doesn't actually taste like much on its own. Slightly sweet, slightly starchy, somewhat earthy, a little bit bready from the water crackers. Not a whole lot of depth, certainly not an explosion of flavor or anything like that. Really quite bland. Yeah, we can do better. And that just sort of lingering mouthfeel from the gelatin is a little off-putting too. There's got to be something you can do with this. I'm thinking if you're going to put beans on a cheesecake, well, first of all, it should taste like something. It should taste like beans, or at least has beans in it. And this kind of sort of doesn't. I mean, a little, but everything is just muted down. I think I know how to fix this. I'm gonna start my bean cheesecake redemption with a sort of a Southwest hamburger patty. Got about a quarter pound of ground beef, along with some onion powder, garlic powder, salt, paprika, chili powder, and a little bit of cayenne as well, and just kind of mash that around to combine and form it into a nice hamburger patty, which I'm going to sear off in a little bit of oil. Nothing special, it's just going to be a hamburger patty. In the meantime, I'm going to make the crust. Start off with a handful of tortilla chips, blitzed up in my food processor until you'll still have recognizable chunks, but fairly even. To this, I'm going to add the usual melted butter to get that to all stick together, and just to kind of amp up the flavor a bit, I'm going to add some spices, some seasoning to the crust as well. Garlic powder, onion powder, and a little bit of chili powder here, just to kind of give that crust a little bit of extra flavor. And by now you know the drill. I'm going to be spreading this out into one of my little springform pans. Make sure that I have a nice even layer on the bottom, about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch thick. Thinner is better, but mashing this stuff around, sometimes you end up with some thin spots, and I want to make sure that I actually have a good crust. Put that in the refrigerator, just like always, and refrigerate while I make my filling. My queso cheese filling has some softened cream cheese as well as some cheddar cheese here, and I'm adding a little extra flavor in the form of picante sauce. Just mix that up and set aside. Once the crust has had a chance to refrigerate for an hour or two, I can start to assemble. Here's my salsa and cheese mix. It does turn a little bit Pepto pink, but I think it was necessary. I didn't really want a really liquidy layer like you get with the salsa all by itself, so I wanted to incorporate that in there. On top of that, I'm placing my hamburger patty, and I'm going to admit right here that I didn't actually think about making it exactly the right size to fit this. It just happened to. Again, a bean cheesecake is not a bean cheesecake without the beans, so I'm going with some refried beans here. And just spreading that out to not only make sure that it forms a complete layer, but also so it sort of squishes in and fills in the cracks in the hamburger patty. On top of this, I'm doing a layer of fresh guacamole. And on top of that, some of the sour cream that I already had on hand from the original iteration of the bean cheesecake. I guess we're going to treat the sour cream here as frosting. So, nacho typical cheesecake. This is essentially a 7-layer dip, but in cheesecake form, sort of. You can sort of call it a cheesecake, but in any case, so I was going to present it all majestic-like, but in taking it out of the springform pan, I dropped it on the countertop. So it is no longer pretty. But let's find out how this tastes. Now, I will say this is served cold. That means that the hamburger layer is quite dense. It's a little difficult to get a fork through, but I've got a little bit of every layer. It's tasty. The hamburger patty with the basically taco seasonings tastes just like taco meat. It's just that it's in a sort of more moldable patty form. Cold refried beans are really not my favorite thing in the world. There were points in my life where that was a meal, but it's not bad. And in this form, that's a really big bite. In this form, it's not half bad. I think a little more tomato. I think if I had actually made something like a tomato jam or a tomato coulis, something like that to kind of go over the top, would be appropriate. Give it a little bit of, that acidic tang, a little bit of sweetness to kind of balance out this very earthy flavor of the beans and the meat and the tortilla chips and everything. But the guacamole and the sort of queso layer make this really quite rich. It's tasty. You do get the tortilla chip flavor. It's obviously not as crunchy as an actual tortilla chip, but it's really quite tasty. I would hazard to even say that I would make this again. So what do you think? Did I successfully redeem the bean cheesecake? As I said, the original wasn't that bad. It just wasn't good. So let me know your thoughts, if there's anything else that you think I should have done. And if you have any other ideas for future recipes for me to redeem, please leave your suggestions in the comments below. As always, like, subscribe, and share with your friends. And I'll see you next time here on Recipe Redemption. Bye now.